Welcome to Leadership from the Cross with Pastor Scott Thom. This broadcast is devoted to taking your ministry and life to the next level. No matter what the level you are at, let us help advance your leadership skills. Leadership from the Cross is a ministry of Cross Christian Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And now, Pastor Scott Thom.
Well, welcome into Leadership from the Cross. This is Pastor Scott again, and I want to give you 3 secrets to ministry, 3 keys to ministry that I've learned over the years. This is something that as I went through some of my old notes and leadership training that I did, I came across some notes that said, now I've had 10 years in ministry this month. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, 10 years now. I'm almost 30 years now, and I feel old, but in some ways I feel old, but in other ways I'm just as young in mind and excited to get on with ministry and what Lord has for us in front of us. Even in these dark times, I'm excited. But these keys are something that I taught and clung to early on in ministry because I had some great teachers, and they still work. They're kind of a mindset, they're keys, they are staples that you need to have. I can expand on these later, but I want to go through these. And the podcast may get a little longer. I have a confession to make. I was kind of rushing through the previous podcast, trying to keep them to about 30 minutes or so because we were thinking of using them for a regular radio program, and we were moving towards a internet radio. And I thought, I just can't be governed by that. Maybe I could teach and we could crop it down. But I thought, you know what? The way I like to listen to these podcasts, and probably the way you do too, is just give me the meat, man. Let me learn, and I get to a place where I don't want to stop. I get compulsive of learning and picking up just tidbits. If I can learn something new in each podcast, then I've gained every day. And so I'm just going to take these and go through them and not try to rush them or trim them down except where they're really needed. And let's get into this. The first key is honoring those in authority over you. That's key in ministry. That's your big secret. Well, yeah, it is. And let me build on this because this is something that in today's generation, people are often autonomous. I'm not going to place myself under anybody. I'm going to church hop. I'm going to, do what I want to do, and you're not the boss of me. And to a point, that's good, but to another point, it's not very good, because if you're doing your own thing and you're not paying attention to what God's doing through authority, and He works tremendously through authority. That's His primary way of working through either family or employment or the church. If you're missing that, if you're not picking up on the keys that God has for you, you're going to miss a lot of blessings. So let me build on this. In Exodus 20, verse 12, it says, honor your father and mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land, which the Lord your God gives you. Now, this is a commandment with a blessing if you're obeying this. And this is something that even Jesus obeyed. Remember that when He was 12 and He was not with them when they were traveling back from Jerusalem, they went back to find Him and found Him in the temple. And what are you doing? He says, I'm about my Father's business. But they were saying, you got to come with us. You're only 12. So He submitted to them. And He grew in grace with the Lord. He grew in strength. He grew in knowledge. He grew in all these things on the human side of all these things that He needed to do. And He, being literally God in the flesh, even though He's 12, it is full deity there. Yet He submitted Himself to this human father and mother. The Lord looks strongly at this principle. In Matthew 5:4, Jesus taught this, and He says, for God said, honor your father and mother. And he who speaks of father and mother, let him be put to death, quoting the scripture. In Proverbs 30:17, it says, the eye that mocks a father and scorns a mother, the ravens of the valley will pluck it out, and the young eagles will eat it. Now, how about that for description? It's really talking about somebody who's dishonoring parents And it's not talking about following parents that are commanding evil. It is talking about parents and obeying parents, even if they're non-believers. It's not asking you to follow if they are commanding evil. No, this is about leadership. What does it have to do with parents? Most of us are grown. We're outside of that. That's right. I'm just building an argument for following and honoring our authorities. Because even Paul, writing to the Romans, is talking about the civil authorities. And the Romans have been killing Christians. And they had killed Jews. And so here we got Paul writing back to the Romans, and Romans 13:7 says, render to all what is due them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Even Caesar, even this heathen, self-proclaimed king, later going to be proclaiming himself, this kind of deity on earth. Well, yeah, up to a point, right? Not to worship him, but in all other things, try to honor him. Jesus paid tax and temple tax, even though he's the Lord of the temple, right? In 1 Timothy 5:17, it says, let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who work hard at preaching and teaching. This is something that I look for in leadership. If I've got someone I don't mind somebody who questions, who says, well, how are we going to do that or what? I don't mind anything, because that type of thing you can teach them, they can learn. It's this kind of rebellious, you don't own me, can't tell me what to do type of thing. Well, then I can't use you in ministry. When I was with Pastor Raul Reese in California, very, very large ministry, and we were doing crusades locally and then in different places of the world, in Australia and South America, Romania, all kinds of places back east, all along the West Coast, up and down California, back east. And I was in charge of training the new believer instructors. When people come forward, they receive the Lord. We have guys that give them a Bible and take 5 minutes with them, share with them to read the Bible and get into the Word, pray, connect with the church, and just go over the basics of walking with Christ. Get them on a good start. Get them plugged into a church. Well, when I teach these meetings, I teach them, look, when you're out there, one of the key things I want you to do, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but I don't want you to wear something that is too flashy, or T-shirts that have too much writing on it, or, like even tie-dye shirts. Just keep it very simple. I want you to blend in the background. And one of the trainees, one of the guys who wanted to become an instructor, just opposed this. He was vehement. He was mad at me. And he was like, you can't tell me what to wear. And, Christians come in here and you the way you act, and now you want to control every little thing. And I'm trying to explain to him why, and he just storms out. And everybody's kind of stunned, and they're looking around the room. Then they look at me, and I say, look, here's why. I've found over the years, because we've seen literally thousands of people come to the Lord. And if you're up there trying to share with them about the Bible, but you're chewing gum, that can be a distraction, and they're not hearing what you're saying. If you've got loud colors going on, tie-dye shirts, a lot of words going on in your shirt, all kinds of things, images on your shirt, it can be a distraction. You've only got 5 minutes with these people, because after that, they're worried about their friends leaving. They're worried that maybe they left their purse back with a friend, or that they're got family, or their kids are waiting on them, or they're not with their kids. So you only got them for a short time. And if they're distracted and you're basically ushering them into the kingdom, explaining what they just did, getting them committed to Christ, this is important. And so all we wanted to do is, hey, we must decrease, he must increase. So on that day, just wear bland stuff, right? And it's just important because we're serving other people. Well, somebody like that, I can't choose for ministry. I'm not going to try and talk them into, come back, we'll work with you, wear what you want, whatever. Because if you can't follow those simple rules, what's going to happen when we ask you to do something else that's more critical, and we have a new believer who's got a very difficult problem, maybe a legal problem, maybe they have drugs on them or other stuff that we've got to deal with this in a proper manner. And if we've got a new believer who's not going to follow instructions, then they may just really end up, causing somebody to stumble or to not walk with the Lord, or legal problems or worse. And so on something as simple as that, can't use them. Hebrews 13:17 says this, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with grief, for this would be unprofitable for you. See, here's a key. In ministry, to be profitable in ministry, to be useful in ministry, to make an impact in ministry, obey the leaders that are over you, submit to them. Now, that doesn't mean you do every single little thing they say and that you can't have your input. We'll cover in another podcast how to work within the confines of maybe a difficult boss, a difficult leader, a difficult lay leader, a difficult pastor. When you're in ministry, those things happen. Look, leaders fall short, but we're still called to honor them. We're still called to try to work with them, to try to bring about their desires, even if we don't agree with everything they're doing. Look, Daniel honored a heathen king who had killed many Jews. And basically, Daniel was there in Babylon at the citadel because he was kidnapped out of his home land. Yet he served the king. Now he didn't defile himself. He had made up in Daniel 1:8. He had made up his mind not to defile himself, right, with the king's food or wine or whatever. But when that push came to shove, what did he do? Did he rebel, or did he say, "Hey, can we work something out here? Can we eat like fruit and vegetables, drink water until the matter is observed over 10 days, and then, you do what you will." So even in that, he didn't rebel. He came up with a great solution. Some would say a compromise. It's not a compromise. It's a solution. It's one of the ways and one of the things we'll get into later on. But here's the thing. If you dishonor authority, man, that's bad news. Really, in Scripture, that's a sign of the condemned. It doesn't mean that if you're a Christian, you're rebelling, that you're condemned, but it's something that God detests and something that he points out about those who are not in line with him, that they are part of the condemned. And 2 Peter 2:9 says this, "Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from temptation and keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the flesh, in its corrupt desires, and despise authority. Daring, self-willed, they do not tremble when they revile angelic majesties or ministries, the angels, whereas angels who are greater in might and power do not bring a reviling judgment or a anarchist claim against them before the Lord." So look how God deals with those who rebel. He says, he's reserving them for a day of judgment. Korah pulled this with Moses and was rebuked, and actually far worse than that, right? The land opened up and he went straight to hell. Miriam got struck with leprosy. So God does not want us to rebel. He wants us to be part of the solution. He wants us to fall in line with the vision. Sometimes that vision isn't as cohesive at the start. It takes time to work its way out. But if we're part of the solution and praying for our leaders, we're going to get there. So the number one secret is just be obedient in ministry. Whether you agree or disagree, again, we're not talking about sin, something that's illegal, unbiblical, or unethical, but we're talking about, otherwise you may say, well, I know how to do this better, or you think you know how to do this better. Just jump on board and have a mindset of, let's get it done. I'm here to help. I'm not here to complain. Those who always are not putting themselves in subjection to authority are usually those who are also complaining to other people and causing other people to question authority. Bad deal, bad thing to do. When you're on board, when you're working alongside of what God's plan is, and working alongside, working for, working under authority, God blesses. He blesses tremendously. The second thing is just having faith in difficult times. Well, faith, being under authority and faith, those are secrets? Yeah, because we don't all do it. And this isn't just having faith. This is having faith and sustaining faith in difficult times. Because if you're going to obey, here's the key. You don't agree with what's going on with leadership, but if you're obeying leadership and you're helping them out and you're part of the solution, you have to trust, you have to have great faith that God is working in the midst of this. It will actually increase your faith. You know, when the apostles asked the Lord about increasing their faith, it's in Luke 17, he says, they're saying, hey, Lord, increase our faith. Show us how do we build our faith? And he's talked about if you have faith as a mustard seed, this tiny seed, you can say to this huge tree, be uprooted and be planted in the sea, and it's going to obey you. But he starts to say, which servant who's out there, plowing the field, tending the sheep, when he comes in from the field, is the master going to say immediately, come immediately, sit down and eat? But will he say to prepare something for me to eat? So the servant's preparing for the master, and serve me till I've finished, and then afterwards you eat and drink. Why does this fit in with this parable? Why does this fit in with the question, increase my faith? The point is in Luke 17:9, he says, he does not thank the servant because he did the things which were commanded. So look, if you're doing just what you should be doing, that's not great faith. To do the things apart from seeing any residual benefit, to do the things that you're called to do, even if you disagree with them, in that you might know a better way of doing it, or think you know a better way of doing it, or this isn't the time to do this, or man, I think this is, off kilter. We need to be focusing more on missions, or we need to have more money for children's ministry, or whatever it is. And in our mindset, we're like, that's not how I would run it. Well, you're not running it. And so you're not a good servant unless you're doing at least the minimum of what you're supposed to be doing. If you're not and then some kind of person, a second mile type of person, you're not living by faith. And ministry is living by faith. And it's living by faith when you don't feel like it, when you sustain faith in difficult times. And by going the second mile, you're saying, Lord, I trust you that you're working through my leader. I'm trusting you that if my leader needs to change, or I need to change, or whatever, that you can do that by giving us direction through authority, through other circumstances, but I'm trusting in you. So it isn't just faith, it's faith in difficult times. What will happen in ministry is people are there while everything's going good. When things are going good, everybody's happy, everybody's, copacetic, it's great, we're on board. But when things aren't going good, people want to bail, they want to complain, they want to do things that hurt the system rather than help. I remember when we were moving a church, when I was an assistant pastor, we were moving from West Covina to Diamond Bar, and we were going from a very small facility at the time, it's actually pretty large, to a huge facility, 110,000 square feet, 20 some odd acres. But a lot of people left. We couldn't get in right away. We couldn't get permits right away. There's a thing with the fire marshal, and the city didn't really want us there. We were taking a lot of their commercial property. And so it was something that just, you follow the rules and you follow that. And so, but we had to have service outside for 9 months. But about 3,000 people didn't follow us in the move who wants to have service on the outside. Now, it is Southern California, so it is pretty beautiful most of the time. But we went through some winter months there, and it was cold. So people were having service. We were sitting outside, and so couldn't put up a tent. They wouldn't allow that. There was a lot of things going on. But because we lost 3,000 people, we had to cut down staff, and sometimes we didn't get a paycheck right away, or sometimes we went without a paycheck. And people began to grumble. While I'm serving here, look, the staff, the leadership, the board, the pastor made the wrong decision and we shouldn't be here and they're building their own kingdom and blah, 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 blah. Because things got tough and faith didn't sustain them. They didn't have faith in leadership, so that faith was shaken right away. And they hurt other ministries. They hurt other people doing ministries. They hurt the body by complaining. And secondly, they didn't have faith in the Lord. What if you were a missionary? You wouldn't be guaranteed a salary. For most missionaries, you're not guaranteed a salary. For most church pastors planting a church, you're not guaranteed a salary. Look, we talked about it and said we may have to go find jobs outside of the church. Are we willing to do that and come in and still minister? And most guys wouldn't. But yet that ministry survived. We got inside and immediately we had a gain of like 1,500 people as soon as they heard that we were inside, and it continued to grow. And it's thousands and thousands that come every service, 3 services on a Sunday morning. And the church is flourishing and many people are getting saved every week. But they didn't sustain it through the difficult times. How do you build more faith? What did Jesus say? He said, when the difficult times come, when you're serving, when it doesn't look like anything's happening, when you should just be obedient to leadership and doing and then some, that's when your faith grows. When the servant was just doing his job, well, what praise is there in that? But when he goes above and beyond and he's trusting that the employer, the situation, that he's going to be rewarded, that he's going to be taken care of, that he's doing what he's called to do in that ministry, then he's got it. He's going to grow in faith. If you want to understand God's word better, you have to walk it. And until you start walking in the difficult times and have faith in difficult times, you're not going to have certain answers to certain key passages in Scripture. You're not going to understand your role. You're not going to understand the training and teaching that God is setting you up for. That many times what he's doing with you in ministry, if you're underneath someone, or even in work, in the secular job, that he's setting you up for ministry training in the future. He's preparing you and preparing your heart. So expect to walk it, expect to go above and beyond, even when circumstances don't deem it, even when your heart doesn't feel in it, even when you don't necessarily agree, and don't expect to be served. Be a servant. Do what you need to do to go forward. And this is hard. I know it's hard. I was never perfect in this. I did learn over time, though. I learned early on, I think earlier than some people did in ministry. I had some good teachers, and it made things much smoother. But there were still bumps in there, and there were still times where I was like, what are we doing? And we're not getting a paycheck, and how do I tell my wife, and how do we do? But that was few in between. And there were a lot of sacrifices made by our pastor and our board that we didn't even know till much later that they did to get us our paychecks. And the people who are complaining don't know anything they were talking about. If they had only known the sacrifices that these people made so that we could have a warm home to go home to and food on the table, we would have been very, very thankful. Look, this is showing your undying loyalty to God. Most of us are not going to be in a place where a gun stuck to our head and we're told to deny Christ. We know the answer to that. We're not going to deny him. But if you can't follow orders, you're denying Christ. Good godly orders. If we can't follow those orders, we're saying, I don't trust Christ. I don't trust that Christ can work through these circumstances. I don't trust that Christ can work through, my pastor, my leader, my employer, my husband, my home. We've got to be prepared to trust that. When we lose faith, in difficult times, it's often because we haven't learned to stand fast, to stand through any commitment. And that's the third point, commitment to God's call, commitment to that calling, to your specific calling. So number one is just be obedient to authority. Number two is while you're doing that, you're going to build your faith, and it takes great faith to do that. But this is a key to ministry. Ministry takes great faith because things don't always go the way they should. They never go the way that you think they should. And God always works in different ways than you think. So many times that I was questioning things, God worked things out in completely different ways. And I'm like, ooh, like egg on my face going, wow, I didn't see that coming. But had we not taken this step and this step, we would not have met that person and found this solution. This is the way God wanted us to travel. So we gotta be trusting God, obey authority, grow in your faith by doing that. And thirdly, a commitment to your call. Because a lot of times we bail early. We bail way too early. Just like when we were going through this transition, moving from one church property to another church property, and many of the guys bailed. Many of them just took off, and that's that. And they quit. I'm going to go find another job. I'm going to find another ministry. There was even guys who took off, took 300 people with them from the church and said, we're going to start our own church and do this. And we don't agree with how things are being run there. Well, you lose a blessing if you bail before God tells you to bail. And don't leave your commitment by feelings and not completely by circumstances. Nehemiah, here he is, another awesome Jewish leader. I mean, that book is just chock full of leadership principles. We're going to spend a lot of time in Nehemiah. When you go through Nehemiah, you see chapter 2, he's praying, he meets his brother, and he hears that Jerusalem is just still in waste. It's a wasteland. It's laid waste. It's however you could use the word waste, right? It's bad. His heart's broken. He's been praying over this, and he wants to go. And many people have started to trickle down there. You've had a couple other groups go down. Remnants from Israel are starting to go back. And the temple's being somewhat refunctioning. But the walls of the city are down. There's no gates to the city. It's vulnerable. Nobody wants to move back there when there's no security. And no security, no jobs. Even farming and other stuff, you get hired hands. But he didn't take off. Not until he got permission from this king. And this is a heathen king again. This is a king who has killed Jews. But he's serving them faithfully as his cupbearer, which isn't just that I'm bringing you wine or I'm bringing you water or I'm bringing you, your food and tasting it for you. This is also a confidant. This person is also a person who is there during all the meetings and things going on, and that the king can look over to him and says, what do you think? So the cupbearer was much more than, just a servant. He was there as a kind of a counselor as well. And that's why when Nehemiah, he's sad, and why is your face sad? Then he throws up this request, Lord, help, to the Lord of heaven. And he says, oh, please, king, if I found favor in your sight, I'm not conspiring against you, but my father's tombs, the city, everything, it's laid in waste. I want to rebuild it. Here's what the king said. It pleased the king, but he says, how long? Tell me, how long is it going to take? What is it going to take and how long? Right? So immediately he's telling him, I want you back here. He's not just, you can find another cupbearer, right? But here he is. Nehemiah's been with him because the king has been doing construction. If you're a king, you're got your hands in everything, right? Like Sim City, you're a builder, you're a constructor, you've got to deal with water and aqueducts and sewage and people moving in and protection, all these kinds of things. So Nehemiah, over all these years, has been trained for a specific task by the Lord. Had he bailed early, he would have missed some of that training that he needed when Sanballat and Tobiah and all these other people are trying to destroy him. He needed to learn to be savvy as a king, not to be tricked into meeting people and be killed. How to fortify a city, how to inspire people, how to build, how to arrange construction teams, how to do all these things, where to get the lumber, all these kind of things. He knew this, but it's because he stayed there, because he didn't leave early. I am so thankful. I spent a lot of time in California. At the time, I wasn't thankful. When I got saved in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, I thought, that's it. I'm going to start a church. And every time I tried to start like a home study or whatever, it would get going and it would do well, but God would shut it down. The people would get blessed. They would get a job elsewhere. They had to move out of the city, or they had to move to a place farther away, and then said, well, we really can't have a home study here. We're in the middle of moving. And so every time he shut it down, but I didn't know enough. I thought I did. You're a young kid. You read through the Bible once. Oh, I got all the answers. I look back at it. I was so stupid. But here after these years, being sent out to California, Houston, Texas first, then to California, go through Bible college. And I thought, okay, I'm Bible college, I'll go back. But then they asked me on staff, and I thought, okay, 6 months, I'll get a lot of experience, maybe a year, and then we'll go back and plant a church. Well, 14 years later is when finally I was sent out to go plant a church. And I'm so thankful for that. Had I been rambunctious and just left and not had a commitment to the call and to leadership and to faith and to the authority that's over me, I would never have learned all that I've learned being in a huge mega church, and then also having the opportunity to teach all those years in pastoral school and Bible college, which you learn a lot, and then meet all these fabulous teachers and professors that I took classes from and courses from and began to become friends with some of them and to get taught by them and spend time with them was amazing. And I wouldn't be able to do this podcast. I wouldn't be able to have our school that we have and see churches planted. I wouldn't have been able to have the radio program, No Other Doctrine, where I'm answering questions all the time. I wouldn't have had any of that because I would just be a mindset of building a church, building my own church, being selfish, and want to build the biggest church I possibly can. And our mindset's not that way. We want to grow the church and see people saved, but we're trying to grow churches because I'm trying to replicate myself. And I've learned this by staying longer, and it just makes sense. And we'll cover this in another, again. There's so many things I want to share, but we'll cover this in another podcast. I guarantee you we will. So I stayed until Raul said, hey, Scott, it's time for you to go. He knew I wanted to go all along. He knew I wanted to plant, but I waited on him. I waited till he felt you're ready or it's time, because I trusted God to work through my leadership, and I had a commitment to the call that I had at the time. So if you're in a certain ministry or you're not in ministry yet, do what you can do right now. Volunteer for certain areas, and when you get a calling, stay in that calling till he calls you out. But I don't like the children's ministry. Stay there till something else opens up. But I don't like doing that. Well, I had to do a lot of jobs that I didn't like or I didn't feel called to, but because the need was there, I was in it. And I'll tell you what, I learned so many things about that. And when I had to teach in the children's ministry and do that for several weeks or whole summer one time when they were shorthanded, and I'm like, man, I've got all these other responsibilities. I'm running a bookstore. I'm doing the network. I'm teaching the Bible college. I'm doing regular pastoring type of things, and marrying and bearing and counseling. And how am I studying for, this class and teaching these kids? And I'm not the best with kids. And I come to find out I had some talent with the kids, and come to find out I learned some things with the kids, and come to find out that they really enjoyed being in the class with me. I had some fears about that. I'm not going to keep their attention. And I became a better teacher because I was in there, because I learned how to keep their attention better, which I use even to this very day. Just the other day, I was complimented because we had a commotion in the service, and a baby got crying and upset and some things, and people were moving, and it really caused a commotion in the service, more than was just normal and necessary. But I was able to keep most everybody's attention by certain things I was doing. There's certain things that you can break from that. You don't pause at that time, because then everybody looks over there. You don't look at them. You move to a part of the stage that's away from the distraction. You make more hand motions. Your voice gets louder. You smile so it doesn't show you're disappointed or distracted, that you can handle this. So you put a smile on your face. You tell a joke or whatever. You start telling a story, because everybody's head snaps back to when you tell a story or you tell a joke, people pay attention. They wake up, they do it. So I use these techniques, same things I had to do with the kids. I had to be really animated. I had to not just tell the thing, I had to tell stories. I told really sick, stupid stories, sick in the sense, not in a bad way, but in the sense of they were like, oh, groaning, and other stuff. And so I'd play off that, and I would just see how loud I could get them to groan, because if they were groaning, they were paying attention. If they were going, oh, it's a terrible joke. Oh, then they were looking at me and not their phones. They were looking at me. But this is something I learned by staying committed to God's call. You got to stay committed to God's call and let ministry work around you and stay there. It'll prepare you for so many different things in the future. Otherwise, you can disqualify yourself. You can shortchange what God is doing, right? You can get away from the things you need to be doing. Let me close with this. When they excavated Pompeii, it was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius, the volcanic eruption. It was a Roman territory. They found people who were trying to escape either on land or by horse or other things, and they burned to a crisp. There was just no escaping it. Maybe a few got out to sea, but for the most part, this whole society, this whole group, they were wiped out. So some people were huddled in kind of basement areas or the lowest parts or deeper into cliffside and into their dwelling place. But they found one Roman soldier who was leaning back up against a wall. And they figured he was standing until he actually died and was basically encased there, was almost fossilized there. So he died standing at his post, holding on to his lance, holding on to the staff. He was faithful till the end. Now you might think, well, that's crazy, but he probably knew. He probably knew, look, we're all going to die, but I'm not going to cower. I made a commitment. I'm a soldier. I'm going to stand my ground even in the face of death. That's how I was trained. Man, if we can't stand our ground, even in the face of death in children's ministry, if we can't stand our ground, what good are we? Stand our ground. Stay in there. Hang in there. I know it gets tough, but stand your ground. When you do that, God will bless. He will release you. He'll show you when. If he can work within a heathen king, if he can work through Nehemiah's heathen king, if he can work through Daniel's heathen king, if he can work in the kings and the governors who are holding Paul, he could work through your boss or your pastor or your lay leader or whoever it is. He can work through that. Trust him. Okay, so those are 3 key areas there, right? Obey authority, listen to authority, watch authority, take authority as keys and cues and clues of what's going on, what God's doing. Be part of the solution, not an anchor, not a detriment, not dragging in your heels. Secondly, if you're doing that, then you have to walk by faith. And this faith will grow because you'll begin to see God work in it time and time again. I got to see prayers answered where sometimes I was right and leadership was taking a wrong turn. Most of the time I was wrong. And I got to see that God was working through the midst of the situation, and I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. But my faith grew in that time. And it really helped me when I was planting my own church. And thirdly, be committed to that ministry, committed to that position, committed to that place. And if you show your commitment and you hang tough, you will learn new things. You will not be a liability. You will uplift the ministry. Ministry will grow for you, and ministry opportunities will grow. Because Nehemiah probably never thought for a moment that, until much later on, that he would be the key person rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. He had prayed about it. He had hoped about it. But then God opened the door, and all of a sudden, boom, he's there, right? So these are the things that, man, I hope they bless you. I hope they help you in ministry. And so there's going to be more and more as we go on with Leadership from the Cross. You can go check out leadershipfromthecross.org, our other podcast, which is No Other Doctrine. I still do live Bible questions on air in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had all over the country, East Coast for a while, but we pulled back and thought, you know what, we could save that money for better use and put it out as a podcast and get it all over the world for far less. So we've done that with it, but you can plug into that. And if you have questions for that, you can go to our website and click on the question. Send me a question. I would love to answer your question live on the air the next weekend when we go and do that. So that sometimes changes because we get spam. So go to the website. That's nootherdoctrine.org, leadershipfromthecross.org, or crossfellowship.org. Any one of those 3 will lead you around to each of the 3. All right, until next week, blessed wishes. This is Pastor Scott saying bye-bye.
You have been listening to Leadership from the Cross with Pastor Scott Thom of Cross Christian Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Check out Pastor Scott's ministry training school and his other radio show, No Other Doctrine, by visiting our website at crossfellowship.org. That's crossfellowship.org. Also, you can visit our Facebook page at Facebook.com/Leadership from the Cross.